The Dan Yorke State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
Good evening and welcome to my State of Mind. I am Dan Yorke. Here is a question for you. Do you know what the JCLS is? Well, we don't have a lot of time. It's the Joint Committee on Legislative Services. Does that help you? Probably not. But it is the governing agency made up of 5 members that runs the General Assembly, which is the legislative arm of our government. And it is the subject of a lot of concern on the part of the Republicans, mostly in the House of Representatives. And we're going to talk about that saga tonight. They had a press conference last week, and today and tonight we'll talk to the representative who led the charge in asking all these questions and responding to a specific case regarding the JCLS.
Jeff Britt trial.
House Minority Leader Blake Filippi claims a request for Joint Committee on Legislative Services documents from the attorney for indicted political operative Jeff Britt has set a legal trap. Britt, who worked on House Speaker Nicholas Mattiello's 2016 campaign, was charged in October for money laundering connected to a mailer that endorsed the Cranston Democrat. Filippi and other GOP leaders have claimed the JCLS and its $46 million a year budget is illegally controlled by Mattiello. Britt's request for documents pertaining to federal funding for the 2020 census came to Filippi, who is the committee secretary, but the GOP leader says requesting the documents from Mattiello creates a conflict since the speaker is expected to testify at Britt's trial.
He has an inherent conflict as a witness in this criminal trial, and the documents may relate to things that he could have possibly done improperly on JCLS that Jeff Britt wants to know.
Filippi says he could face civil litigation if the requested documents are not released. Mattiello would not comment, but his spokesman called the GOP news conference political theater and said the documents in question are controlled by the Department of Administration, not the JCLS. Minority Whip Mike Chippendale says the request underscores the lack of oversight for the money spent by the committee.
It's patently unfair to the entire state of Rhode Island and the people who are funding this $1 million a week spending with absolutely zero oversight.
The GOP also claims the JCLS is at the epicenter of 3 investigations, including the Britt case and the controversial Convention Center audit. More on that on WPRI.com. With the Target 12 investigators, Walt Buteau, Eyewitness News.
And so we introduce Representative Blake Filippi, the minority leader of the Republican Party at our State House. And of course, he represents Block Island and Charlestown and all those places to the south of Rhode Island. Way in the deep south, is maybe I say it. Rep, thanks for joining me. Appreciate it.
Happy to be here, Dan. South Kingstown and Westerly.
There you go. So this is a complicated conversation, and for viewers who are able to follow this at the end, there will be a quiz, and if you get 40% on the quiz, I think you've done pretty well. And it's important, though, that we cover this. But for those who don't follow this, we ought to always set the table on a foundation. The JCLS is called the Joint Committee on Legislative Services. It is the entity that runs the General Assembly. But it has a phantom nature to it. It has a paid executive director in Frank Montanaro, an ally of the speakers. And traditionally, this entity, the JCLS, has been run by the Speaker of the House, meaning he or she is the boss of the General Assembly. But the JCLS does have appointees, and there are 5. You're one as the minority leader of the House. There's the majority leader of the House, the Speaker himself, and on the Senate side, the Senate President and the minority leader of the Senate, meaning the Republicans. So there are 5 positions on the JCLS, but historically, it doesn't meet. Why?
Because I don't think they want to have public meetings. They don't want the people's business to be done in an open and transparent manner. And they want to have, or the speaker wants to control this $46 million without any checks and balances. up until 2010, Dan, they met consistently. They took votes. There was a stenographer taking transcripts of the meetings, operated how it was supposed to operate. Now, I don't necessarily agree with maybe all the decisions that were made, but at least there was a vote, notice, debate. Come 2010, started with Speaker Mattiello's predecessors, they just stopped the meeting. And I think it's completely unlawful. So basically the JCLS controls the administrative function of the General Assembly. That administrative function is vested in the House and the Senate. The House and the Senate delegated those administrative functions to the JCLS. And in statute said it's controlled by a bipartisan, bicameral group. That group hasn't met in 10 years, and I think it's just because the speaker wants to control it all, and he doesn't want any checks and balances. And I just think it's totally unlawful.
Back in the day when it met, it still didn't meet a lot. Was it an annual meeting? What was the general work product that came out of a JCLS real meeting?
So from what we can discern from the limited records we have, that it actually met monthly or bi-monthly. We have a bunch of transcripts, I think, for a 7-year period or 6-year period where there was over 30-something votes that were taken with notice, and it operated properly. So it can meet. It's done it before. It's just not doing it now, and it's totally unlawful.
The constitutional requirement for the JCLS to operate says what about having meetings and votes of the full body?
Okay, so we're going to get into the weeds here. This is a power that would be retained by the House and the Senate. Their administrative function, hiring, firing, all that jazz. If the House or Senate were to exercise that administrative function, it would have to be by a vote of the body, right? There would have to be notice. The body would have to meet. They'd have to have a quorum. They'd have to have a majority to do anything. That's the way our rooms work. So when the General Assembly delegates that administrative function to the JCLS is subject to the same constitutional limitations which limit the House and the Senate. Notice, meeting, quorum, majority, vote. That's the gist of it.
Gist of it.
Yeah, so the General Assembly can't create a child that is free from all the constitutional reins that are on the General Assembly.
Is that interpretation? What is
So it was kind of hard for me to hear you, but you asked, is it my interpretation? So it's basically in Article 6, Section 6 of the Rhode Island Constitution, where it says, the operation of the General Assembly may be regulated by law. You have a law creating the JCLS, and the Constitution says, comma, subject to the limitations contained in this Constitution. And so that's specific to Rhode Island, but there is an overwhelming body of Supreme Court case law, both Rhode Island and United States Supreme Court, which says that majority rule is a fundamental law in the state of Rhode Island. And that by me being denied my ability to participate on JCLS, not only does it violate the Constitution because the speaker's doing legislative acts without meeting, et cetera, but it's also violating my constitutionally protected rights to notice, meeting, vote, as violating my due process and free speech rights.
Okay, so we'll talk about this some more because what Rep. Filippi is doing is articulating a lot of his good arguments in litigation that exists right now to force the JCLS to actually meet. The saga that caused the press conference last week that we began with here at the beginning of the segment, we shall flesh out so that you've got a real life example of what this is all about. We'll be right back on Dan Yorke State of Mind with State Representative Blake Filippi, the Secretary of the JCLS in the state. Welcome back to My State of Mind. You see on the screen State Representative Blake Filippi. He's our minority leader, meaning he's the top Republican in the House of Representatives and a member of the JCLS, the Joint Committee on Legislative Services by statute. We just gave you an entire history of an explanation of what this thing called the JCLS is. It is the administrative arm, a body of the General Assembly, and it is both a function by name, and it is something that Blake asserts, and I think most reasonable people would agree, needs to meet, has 5 members of leadership in the General Assembly. Now, the reason you had a press conference last week, Blake, was to tell about this saga. And the saga, I'll help you along so we can get to the meat of this. This is you got this request from the former U.S. Attorney, now private counsel, Robert Corrente, who was representing Jeff Britt, who's a well-known political operative in political circles, who got jammed up on what I consider to be a 57 and a 55 campaign violation, but was charged by the Attorney General for lack of a better term, kind of a money laundering allegation, where $1,000 went to fund flyer for a Republican candidate who failed in her attempt in the 2016 primary, who then was encouraged to send out a flyer and didn't have any money to do so, was encouraged to send out a flyer supporting the Speaker of the House, the Democrat, versus the Republican winner, who was Steve Frias at the time. This is a 4-year-old story. And in the nick of the statute of limitations time, Mr. Britt was charged, exclusively by the Attorney General, and that case is pending. The attorney petitioned this JCLS, and you being the secretary, for documents related not to the case specifically, it seems to me, but to financial records on the U.S. Census and the people who were working it. I think I know why. Do you know why?
No, I've heard theories. I don't have any direct knowledge, so I'm not going to speak to it, but it's obvious. Oh, let me rephrase. I think we have to assume, for the purposes of how we operate in response to this request, that he's trying to dig up information to help his client in the criminal prosecution. And he's digging in. You have to. I mean, there could be a 1% chance he's not, and he's doing it for curiosity, but no. We have to assume he's trying to help his client in relation to the Mattiello campaign that he was jammed up on.
It seems to me that the personnel financial records of people who are earning money and running some of the census work in the state, some of those players may be some of the same players who were working for the Mattiello campaign back in 2016, who may have said X or Y to the Board of Elections in their inquiry on this matter that Mr. Britt is charged, or to the grand jury, or to the Attorney General's office. So clearly, it's a pressure effort on the part of the defense attorney to do these things. I'm guessing you remain ambivalent or benign about the motive for that. Your problem was that you'd like to lawfully respond to the records request, but you felt you couldn't. Why?
Sure. So the reason I can't respond to it, and I'm listed as the secretary of JCLS, the secretary of organizations is supposed to have care, custody, and control of all documents. Speaker Mattiello controls all those documents. The Joint Committee doesn't. Speaker Mattiello has unlawfully taken over JCLS and has care, custody, and control of all those documents. And I cannot, in good conscience, forward this on to Speaker Mattiello and say, hey, would you respond to Mr. Corrente or give me the documents and I'll respond to Mr. Corrente, because there's such an enormous conflict with the Speaker that I could never certify as complete any response to Mr. Corrente's document request.
And you say the conflict exists because the case that Mr. engaged in involves the Speaker.
Yeah, the Speaker, it was the Mattiello 2016 campaign. Mattiello was on the witness list, Mr. Britt's witness list, for his defense in his trial. And we can only presume that because Mattiello controls everything in JCLS, that Mr. Corrente's trying to dig up dirt on Mattiello and maybe other people who were involved, trying to find bias in witnesses that would testify against Mr. Britt as well.
So you then went to the Attorney General and asked for assistance in this matter. What did you want from Attorney General Peter Nerone?
So so the first purpose of our press conference was to further illustrate the absurdity in JCLS. If we had a functioning JCLS, we'd cut Mattiello out. The remaining 4 members would sit in a room, and we'd figure out how to respond to this lawful document request, probably bring in some type of outside attorney to go through the documents, pull them out, send them to Mr. Corrente, be done with it, and move on. The other purpose of the press conference was that approximately 6 weeks ago, I had approached Attorney General Peter Nerone and said, Mr. Nerone, Attorney General Nerone, I'm very concerned about being a member of this board that doesn't meet. If something goes down, am I going to get egg on my face? Am I going to be exposed to civil liability? Am I going to be exposed to criminal liability? Are these people going to try and dump things on me that I had nothing to do with? And per statute, Peter Nerone, the Office of Attorney General, is supposed to be the legal advisor to all members of the General Assembly. So I approached him 6 weeks ago and said, listen, I need some help here. I need to get legal advice on how to protect myself, insulate myself from what I see as a rogue committee. He hadn't responded by the time we had the press conference. So the second purpose was really to just put everything in the public, to protect ourselves and to further expose the failure of government in so many different ways.
Okay. He responded and said, can't help you, don't want to get in the middle of this constitutional legislative mess, yet he has aided you in what way?
So he has a APRA unit, Access to Public Records Act, and that is what Mr. Corrente served upon me, was an APRA request. And so the Attorney General's office has an APRA unit. And since this is now a specific legal issue, so Attorney General Nerone said he couldn't represent me on just general theory matters, but he could represent me if there was a specific legal issue. And so once we got this document request, it became a specific legal issue that his APRA unit's been helpful on.
So did Mr. Corrente get his documents?
Not yet. I mean, we have 10 days to respond, possibly another 20. You know, we're right now trying to figure out what to do. And we don't know. Where within the next few days, we're going to have to come up with some type of response. Could be anything from forwarding it on to the speaker or returning it to Mr. Corrente and saying, sorry, man, got to go through the court, get a subpoena.
And the irony is the Attorney General is helping you on public information request processes, but the Attorney General is prosecuting Mr. Britt, who's being defended by Mr. Corrente. So it is a tangled web. I think we've explained the story itself. When we come back, we'll talk about what all this means and how does it impact our governance. That. Serving the taxpayers. We'll be right back with State Representative Blake Filippi on My State of Mind. Stay with us. Welcome back to our final segment here on Dan Yorke State of Mind with State Representative Blake Filippi. All right, so press conference aside, that case stands in limbo that caused the Republicans to meet and again point out to the JCLS or to the public that the JCLS is hugely problematic. You still have litigation against the speaker over the JCLS about his thing with the Convention Center Authority where, he ordered an audit reportedly and you went, what is that all about? And we know it was politically motivated. We know it's the subject of a grand jury investigation. He pulled that audit back after you, went to the court and said, we need to restrain this because I don't have anything to do with this, and we need to meet to talk about it. Where does that case stand right now?
So that case involves not just the convention center, but the overall macro, the speaker illegally exercising JCLS authorities. The convention center is just kind of exhibit A in the speaker's unlawful control of this committee. So we filed that lawsuit in January. They, being the Speaker, Senate President, Joe Sakarchi, House Majority Leader, and then Treasurer Magaziner, and then State Controller Keenan, they're all defendants. They all moved to dismiss, saying to the court two things. You don't have jurisdiction. You got to stay out of this legislative dispute. And two, even if you get involved, there's nothing in the statute that requires us to meet. We obviously disagree with both those contentions. It's in front of a judge now. It's in his hands, and he's going to decide those questions as to whether this case is dismissed or goes on.
All right, we only have a minute. Tell me what the temperament of the General Assembly right now. I mean, we talked at length about the lack of meeting, the lack of attention, the lack of getting back into regular order with the governor, ending her executive authority, blah 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 blah. What's your read on what the temperature is, other than summertime, at the General Assembly in the midst of this whole COVID thing? Real quick.
I think it's despondent. The JCLS is just another example of the top-down control by the speaker. The memberships have given up all power to the speaker. They really have very little say. There's a reason why our committees are always empty, because frankly, no one's voice matters. It's just the speaker, and membership have given him all that control, and they don't have the guts to take it back. And so they're just despondent. They're, all right, I'll just wait till I'm told what to do. And I don't know how you live like that as a representative.
We'll leave it there. Representative Filippi, thank you. We'll follow the saga of how we run our General Assembly. Trials and tribulations in the near future. Of course, there are those things like, things to vote on and taxes to pay and budgets to fix, those nuts and bolts. Final word when we come back. Stay with us. It really is a shame that there's a lot of argument about how the legislature is run versus what the legislature is doing. Keep your eye on both, because at the end, it's all about your wallets and your quality of life. Have a great night. Talk to you on the radio tomorrow on WPRO. Thanks for tuning in. Good night.